We're going to be having a look today at some of the kale that we've been growing over winter. The ones that are already planted in the polytunnel are ready to start harvesting, and then we're also going to have a look at how we can store them, whether that's in the fridge or in the freezer, to keep them as fresh as possible for as long as possible. And then we also have some that are ready to go in beds outside. For the kale that I normally will be planting outside, it's usually around February time that I'd be ready to do this. But this year the weather really has been quite up and down, it's been quite grey, so the plants have been growing quite slowly and they've been doing better in the polytunnel rather than putting them outside. You may have already planted yours, in which case that's absolutely fine. You should be hopefully ready to start harvesting from them in the next sort of month or two, or yours may be at a very similar stage to mine, of that they're starting definitely to look like they're ready to go outside now. So this is a variety called Black Tuscan. It's quite a tall, slim variety. And then I have another variety here which is called Red Ruffled, and these ones are definitely ready to go out. They're going to have quite a established root system now, and they should really be producing for us quite quickly. Before we do put those out, the first thing I'm going to do is give them a really good water because they are quite dry. So let them soak if you haven't already planted yours out, and then we'll get them out in a moment. This is the bed of the kales that we planted out before Christmas, and as you can see they are substantially larger than those other ones that are in pots waiting to go outside, and they're definitely ready to start having some leaves removed. This is the lovely one that had some variegation on that we're going to start with. And all you want to do is find where the leaf attaches to the stem, and then just very gently push down on that stem until it snaps, and then that's your leaf harvested. We're always planning to harvest the lower leaves before we start harvesting the higher leaves. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a few off of some of these plants, not all of them, because I haven't got a plan for them yet, and I usually harvest as I go. Once we've harvested the leaves that we want, the next job is to think about any of the smaller leaves that aren't looking so healthy, or are touching the bottom, or have been attacked by pests. You may also find that you need to remove some that have been snapped, or maybe have got some wind damage. So this one here has been attacked by the puppy. So what we don't want is it to encourage any pests, because it's not as healthy. So it's better to remove them. Once you've picked your bunch of kale that you want to harvest, at the moment the very first thing, the easiest thing that we can do, is to take ourselves a glass of fresh water or a vase, and we're literally just going to drop the stems in and make ourselves basically a little bouquet of kale. Just like flowers, when we take them in the house, if we keep cutting off the bottom part of the stem and refreshing the water, these are going to last longer and keep fresher for us in this way. So just pop them in the window or something like that, so they're still getting some light, and keep refreshing that water, and they should at that point last at least 7 days using this technique. And then another option is to place them in a bag, and at this point I would suggest that the best way of going about this is to actually pre-wash them. And then, so these are the ones that I've taken off of the ones that were outside from last year. They've just started to run to seed, and I've now planted the potatoes in that bed. So I wanted to clear the bed, so these have come out. And these will last now, having been washed, in this bag in the fridge, in the salad drawer, for around a week as well. You want to keep an eye on it, because if there's any damaged ones in there, then that might start going slimy, and then at that point you can start having that the whole bag will be affected. You want to keep air in the bag if possible, and then all we're going to do is twist the bag up and tie it together to keep some oxygen in the bag, and then pop that in the fridge like that, and I find it keeps quite fresh for a long time. And then the final option is to do exactly what we've done there with the bag for the fridge, except for with the larger leaves you'd want to chop them up much smaller, and then actually freeze them. And at this point you could either freeze them on a tray and then sort of flash freeze them, so you can make sure that they're separate, or you can do exactly how we've just done and then use the entire quantity that you've put into that one bag, and from there you can put them in omelettes or stir fries, and they can just be cooked as they would normally, and you can make them a little bit bigger and make things like kale crisps as well. The first thing I've done is removed weeds from the area, and then I'm going to remove any of the bottom leaves that have discoloured or aren't looking so healthy. And then with this one, that is already quite tall, I'll be planting it right up to here. And we're on these ones giving them a bit of a closer spacing than I would usually. So usually they're around sort of 12 to 18 inches apart. These are going to be closer because this is the only netted space I have. You'll want to keep them netted from pigeons, not so much caterpillars at this time of the year. Dig the hole a bit deeper than the actual plants are. This bed has been fed, so I'm not adding anything. If you haven't fed yours, then you could add some bloodfish and bone or something like that to the hole. And then just tip them upside down. And if they are pot bound anyway, just loosen those roots up. And then push that soil back around that stem. Make sure they are really well supported. If you're in a particularly exposed area, then you may need to stake them as well. And then exactly the same as I have with the cauliflowers, I'm going to be adding some of these shells. These are from Shell on Earth, and this is just going to hopefully deter any of the slugs and snails causing too much of an issue, and give these plants a chance to get a bit more established first. And we're just going to give them a good watering. I'm not expecting to need to water these again based on the fact that it's likely to rain. If it doesn't rain in the next week, then I will give them at least one more good soak, but otherwise it's got to be pretty dry for me to do that and pretty hot. When these kale plants start to flower, you can eat those flowers first of all. They're very much like tenderleaf broccoli or something like that, and you can eat all parts of all brassicas except for the roots. So enjoy those. It's a bit of an extra harvest really. If they are in places where you are able to leave these plants, for me in the polytunnel, these have to be removed because the tomatoes are coming in next and the peppers. If you've got them in a bed where you are able to leave these in situ, then you can keep removing those shoots, so the flower heads, and actually basically make them into a kind of perennial plant where these may last around 3 to 5 years. It is also the time to start sowing these from seed, so if you don't have the space, then getting your next batch now as well. But it's a great way of not having to continually sow these if you are able to leave them where they are and get a continuation of harvest. This is the final video for the winter kale grow along, and hopefully you've had a successful harvest already and you're starting to enjoy those extra kale leaves that you wouldn't have got if we hadn't have utilised this time over a period where the pests are much less of an issue than they are in the warmer months.